The slap from my dad landed hard enough that my vision flashed white, and for a second, the walls of my own condo seemed to tilt. He didn't shout. There was no warning. The moment I said the one word he never expected from me, no, his hand just lifted. All of this happened after my parents sold their house, gave my brother a $950,000 home, and then showed up at my door, suitcases in hand, ready to take mine, too. Everyone assumes the slap was the moment everything shattered, but in truth, that was only the cover of the story. My name is Natasha Bennett, and for most of my life, I learned to survive by staying quiet. Not invisible, just quieter than the people who always seem to take up the whole room. My brother Daniel was one of those people, the kind who didn't just enter a space, but rearranged the air around him. That was something my parents adored about him. They used to say he was destined for something big, while I was steady, dependable Natasha, the one who never needed anything. Maybe that's why, at 30, I had built a life that ran on order and discipline. My condo in Fort Wayne was my sanctuary. Clean lines, warm lighting, shelves organized by color and height. After spending all day analyzing numbers for clients, I liked coming home to silence. Silence made sense to me. Silence didn't lie. The night everything shifted, fall had already begun. The air carried that thin crispness, smelling like burning leaves and change. I had just brewed a cup of coffee and kicked off my heels when the doorbell rang with 3 quick, frantic chimes. No one rings like that unless there's a mistake or an emergency. When I opened the door, my parents were standing there with 2 suitcases each, like travelers who'd missed their flight. Mom's eyes were wide and glossy. Dad's jaw was set too tight. We lost the house, Mom whispered, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. Bad investments. We have nowhere to go. I stepped aside because what else do you do when your parents show up claiming they're homeless? I made room for their suitcases, told them they could stay a few days, though. The way Dad exhaled, long and relieved, made my stomach knot. Mom busied herself in the kitchen, moving through my cabinets like she'd lived there for years. You need better spices, she murmured, rearranging everything I'd carefully placed. Dad settled onto my couch, remote in hand, flipping channels like it was his living room. Did you talk to a lawyer? I asked gently. Or the bank? Or anyone? Mom's smile froze. Sweetheart, it's complicated. Complicated how? Dad didn't look at me. We're figuring it out. I recognized that tone, the one they used whenever the truth wasn't convenient. Still, I tried to believe them, tried to swallow the unease building in my chest as they sidestepped every question about what actually happened. But then came the little things. Mom stacking her skincare bottles in my bathroom. Dad tightening the screws on a cabinet like he was settling in for a renovation. The way they said we when talking about my condo. The way Mom smiled at me and said, "It feels like home already." And the thing about silence, the thing I loved most about it, is that it makes every wrong sound louder. Something was off. I could feel the truth pressing against the walls of my condo, waiting to break through. By the 3rd morning, the smell of my mother's pancakes filled my kitchen like a fog I couldn't escape. She hummed softly, too softly, while flipping them on my skillet, as if pretending we were back in my childhood home. Dad sat at the counter, scrolling through his phone, commenting on the news like this was his daily ritual in his house. I watched them quietly, my coffee cooling in my hands. Have you two started looking at rentals? I asked. Or talked to anyone about next steps? Mom froze just long enough for me to notice. It's only been a few days, honey. Give us time. Dad didn't bother looking up. You're rushing things. Rushing. They had shown up with 4 suitcases and 0 explanations. I stirred my coffee. I'm not rushing. I'm asking. Dad finally met my eyes, briefly and sharply, before looking away. Drop it for now. That tiny flash in his expression made something cold settle inside me. They weren't confused. They weren't overwhelmed. They were stalling. That afternoon, I stepped onto my balcony and dialed Adrian Cole. We'd gone to college together. Now he worked as a lawyer in the city. If anyone could help me cut through whatever fog my parents were creating, it was him. I need you to check something, I said. My parents claimed they lost their house. His voice softened. Natasha, are you okay? Not really. Just see what you can find. He promised he would. When I went back inside, Mom was reorganizing my pantry again, stacking cans into neat pyramids. Dad had taken over my sofa, shoes off, remote in hand, muttering about fixing the loose hinge on my hallway door, as if he planned to be here long enough to care. Dad, I said, trying to stay calm. That door is fine. Needs a man's touch, he replied. My grip tightened around my phone. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of 2 extra people breathing in my condo. Every instinct in me screamed that I didn't have the full story. The next day, Adrian called. His tone told me everything before his words did. Natasha, your parents didn't lose their house. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I mean they sold it. Voluntarily. I pressed a hand to my chest. Sold? Why? There was a cash transfer. The buyer wired the full amount, $950,000, straight into an account connected to a property under Daniel's name. I stared at my balcony railing, the metal suddenly cold against my palm. My parents sold their house and gave my brother a $950,000 home. I'm afraid so. Silence stretched between us, punctured only by the sound of my own breathing. Adrian continued, they didn't lose anything, Natasha. They made a choice. And now they're at your place because they don't have one anymore. I closed my eyes. The truth slammed into me so hard it stole the air from my lungs. Of course. Of course. Daniel, the golden child, needed a boost. So they handed him their entire life savings. Not a loan, not a discussion, a house. Almost $1 million. And then they came to my door spinning a story about bad investments, expecting me to carry what they'd handed away. I walked back inside feeling like a stranger in my own home. Mom was at the kitchen table sorting through what looked like her skincare collection. Dad had taken apart my hallway door, screwdriver in hand. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable, like this was their home now. Natasha? Mom asked, smiling softly, you okay? I stared at them. Really stared, seeing the truth beneath every gentle lie. They hadn't come here because they needed me. They'd come here because they expected me to be the backup plan, their safety net, their second home. Something in me shifted slowly, carefully, irrevocably, and that's when I knew the confrontation was no longer optional. It was coming, and it was going to hurt. The confrontation began long before the slap. It started with a single sentence, quiet and sharp, spoken across my own kitchen counter the next morning. You two need to start looking for another place. I said it gently at first, almost apologetically, like I owed them softness after everything they'd done. Mom blinked up at me from her coffee mug. Dad stopped fiddling with the cabinet hinge. What do you mean? Mom asked, voice small. I mean, you can't stay here long term. You sold your house. You made a choice. This can't be your backup plan. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was offense. Mom's face tightened. Dad's shoulders hardened. We're your parents, Mom whispered. Where else are we supposed to go? You're being dramatic, Dad added. No, I said, steady this time. I'm setting a boundary. Dad turned toward me fully, the screwdriver still in his hand. We gave your brother a home because he needed help. You're fine. You've always been fine. There it was. The truth laid out like an accusation. My independence wasn't a strength to them. It was an excuse to use me. I didn't raise my voice. You lied to me. You said you lost everything. You didn't. You handed everything to Daniel. So, no, you can't stay here. Mom's eyes widened, tears gathering instantly, as if she could cry her way out of reality. Natasha, sweetheart, but the guilt didn't land this time. I'd grown up feeling it like a weight around my ribs, but now it slid right off. Dad stood up slowly. We're not leaving. You are, I replied. Today or tonight, but you're leaving. The room tightened, the air turning heavy and sharp. I felt something in the house shift, a boundary snapping back into place after years of being ignored. Dad stepped closer. Say that again. No, I said simply. You need to leave. And that was when he snapped. No build-up, no argument, just a sudden, brutal crack across my face. My vision flashed white. The room tilted. My skin burned hot under his palm. For a split second, he froze, like even he hadn't expected himself to do it. Mom gasped, but she didn't step toward me. She didn't move at all. The shock didn't hit me first. The clarity did. Because in that moment, I knew that if I didn't stop this right now, it would only deepen, only spread, only grow into something uglier than we could ever come back from. I straightened slowly, hand pressed to my cheek. Get out of my house. Dad's voice dropped low. You don't talk to me like that. I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up my phone, and dialed 3 digits. Natasha, Mom gasped. Don't do this. He hit me, I said, still staring at Dad. In my own home. When the dispatcher answered, my voice didn't shake. Yes, I need officers at my address. I have 2 people refusing to leave my property. Dad's jaw twitched, but he didn't move toward me again. Mom started crying loudly, desperately, but even her sobs felt like another performance. Another way to shift blame back onto me. Mr. Crawford, my neighbor, knocked on the open door. Is everything okay? No, I said, but it will be. When the officers arrived, the room changed instantly. Dad tried to argue, but he had no legal ground. Mom pleaded with them, wiping her tears, insisting they were victims in all of this. But the officers only looked toward me. Do you want them removed from the property? Yes, I said. I do. Minutes later, they were gathering their suitcases, the same ones they dragged in with false stories and half-truths. And as they walked out of my condo, escorted by law enforcement, something inside me finally fully clicked into place. This wasn't collapse. This was the beginning. My beginning. The night my parents were escorted out of my condo didn't end anything. It only shifted the battlefield. In the days that followed, the silence in my home felt different, cleaner, safer. But underneath it, something else buzzed. The knowledge that Daniel, my parents, and the choices they'd made were all beginning to unravel. 3 days after the incident, I got the first call from Marissa, Daniel's girlfriend. Her voice was tight, almost frantic. Natasha, are your parents with you? No. A shaky breath. He can't do this. He can't just shut down like this. Marissa, what's happening? But before she could explain, the call dropped. I didn't hear from anyone again until 2 weeks later when my grandmother, Evelyn, called. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the storm beneath it. You need to come over, she said. It's time you heard what's going on. When I arrived, she led me into her kitchen where sunlight streamed across the wooden table. Rolled-up newspapers sat next to her coffee mug. Your parents have been staying here. I blinked. Here? With you? They showed up the night after you called the police. Told me they needed a place to think. I exhaled sharply. And what have they been doing? Thinking? Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. No, they've been arguing with each other, with Daniel, with themselves. They're unraveling, Natasha. I sank into a chair. Why? She slid one of the newspapers toward me. The headline made my stomach grip. Local man faces foreclosure after failed startup gamble. Daniel's name wasn't listed outright, but the details were unmistakable. The property value, the location, the timeline. He mortgaged the house, Evelyn said quietly. The one your parents bought him. I felt the air tighten. Mortgaged. How much? Almost all of it. My breath caught. And the investment, gone, she said. Lost in a month. Fast, reckless, poor decisions all around. Of course it was. Of course Daniel, for all his charm and confidence, had gambled their entire lives on a dream he barely understood. Evelyn reached across the table. Your parents believed they were helping him, but they never imagined how deep the hole was. They're facing consequences now. I swallowed. What do they want from me? You, she said, are the only stable one. They want you to fix it. Those words hit harder than they should have because that was the point, wasn't it? I'd been their safety net since the day I turned 18, and they thought they could fall back on me again, no matter how deeply they cut me first. Before I could respond, a car door slammed outside. Evelyn's gaze shifted toward the window. That'll be them. Mom walked in first, her eyes red, but her posture rigid. Dad followed, shoulders hunched, so different from the man who slapped me weeks earlier. And then Daniel stepped inside last, pale, exhausted, defeated. The four of them stood in the doorway like a portrait of collapse. Evelyn cleared her throat. Sit. We all did. Mom's voice trembled. Natasha, we didn't come here to fight. Dad stared at the table. We want to explain. Daniel couldn't look at me at all. I folded my hands in my lap. Then explain. Mom started. We sold the house because Daniel's startup needed a push, and the house we bought him. We thought it was an investment in his future. An investment you didn't even tell me about, I said. Dad winced. We didn't think you'd understand. That sentence burned. I'd heard it my whole life. Didn't think I'd understand, I repeated softly. Or didn't think I mattered. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. Mom wiped her eyes. Daniel finally spoke. I messed up, he whispered. I thought I had a good idea. I thought I could turn it into something that would make you proud. At what cost? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The foreclosure notice, the failed investments, the mortgage, everything spelled out the cost. Dad leaned forward. We know we hurt you. What happened in your condo? It should never have happened. I stared at him. You hit me. His face collapsed. I know. The words scraped out of him. I was angry, embarrassed, losing everything. It made me someone I shouldn't be. Mom reached for my hand, stopped halfway. We didn't come here to ask you to fix anything. We came because Evelyn told us the truth. What truth? That you don't owe us your home, she said quietly. Or your life, or your forgiveness. The room went silent. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn spoke then, calm but firm. Family can make mistakes, big ones. But healing doesn't start with fixing numbers. It starts with owning the damage. Daniel nodded, tears spilling. I'm trying. I'm looking for work. I'll pay back what I can. Mom whispered. We want to make things right, Natasha. But we'll do it without sinking you again. Dad swallowed hard. If you let us, we'd like to earn your forgiveness, not demand it. The anger inside me loosened. Not disappeared, not forgotten, but loosened enough to breathe. I can't fix your choices, I said. And I won't carry them anymore. But I'm willing to talk. Slowly, carefully, Mom broke into sobs. Not desperate, not manipulative this time, but relieved. Dad nodded once, deeply. Daniel finally looked up. Gratitude written all over his tired face. Evelyn smiled softly. Good. Then this is the real beginning. And it was. Not the beginning of forgetting, but the beginning of understanding just how much we had to rebuild separately, first, then maybe someday together. In the weeks that followed, everything moved slowly, the way new healing always does. My parents stayed with Evelyn, not as victims seeking rescue, but as two people learning how to live with the consequences of their own choices. She didn't coddle them. She guided them, firm words, gentle reminders, the kind of honesty they'd avoided for years. Daniel found a job, humble, steady, nothing like the grand visions he once bragged about. But he showed up every day. He called me once a week, not to ask for help, but to tell me how he was doing and to apologize again in small, genuine ways. As for me, my condo felt different now, lighter, grounded. I added a new lock, rearranged a few things. Not out of fear, but out of reclaiming. Adrian checked in often, reminding me that boundaries weren't walls, but doors I controlled. One quiet Saturday, I visited Evelyn. My parents were in the yard, raking leaves, working side by side. They looked up when they saw me. Not guilty, not demanding, just hopeful. And for the first time, I felt something other than anger. I felt possibility. We're not a perfect family now. Maybe we never were, but we're finally an honest one. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to carry someone else's mistakes on your back. My home is mine again. My peace is mine again. And the future? Well, we're rebuilding it one careful step at a time. If any part of my story resonates with you, share your experience in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this.